Tonight, follow-up investigations, new information in a series we call What Happened Next? Tonight's report, concussions on the football field. For years, the NFL denied a link between head injuries and dementia later in life.
You need objective, scientific, medical examinations and studies so you can try to see if there's a clinical correlation between what you're finding in the brain and the clinical picture of the subjects. And that's not available.
What are the new NFL doctors saying now?
It's not rocket science. It's not new. There is no question that repetitive head trauma can cause permanent damage.
And how will this new admission affect the tens of millions of kids playing youth sports?
My son had a concussion, was returned to play without being evaluated correctly, and had multiple hits after that led to his injury. If he would have been taken out of the game and not returned to play, all the medical professionals said my son will not be the way he is right now. They all say that.
We want to educate, we also want to advocate. And if that means helping to pass laws that protect kids, then that's what we're going to do.
Digging deeper into our original investigations, our reporting never stops. We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Reports. Good evening from New York. Concussions and their lasting effect. It's a story that we've reported extensively on this program. It's a story that affects tens of millions of Americans who play sports every day, and it's a story that is evolving very quickly. Since we put on the air our first report in early 2009, the National Football League has made a dramatic shift on how it views concussions. In 2007, the league said repeated concussions have not been shown to lead to permanent problems. Just 3 seasons later, the league posted notices in every locker room in the NFL that said, quote, traumatic brain injury may lead to problems with memory and communication, personality changes, as well as depression and the early onset of dementia, unquote. This is a major change for a sport that lives for the big hit. But long before the NFL took action, concussions began receiving attention because of what happened to a young boy, Zach Lightstead, who was spending a fall afternoon playing the game he loved until he collapsed on the field and became the story every parent fears.
You know, it's a moment that I wouldn't wish on any parent. I mean, your child just one day before that was perfect. I mean, there wasn't anything wrong with your child. And then one day later, you don't know if your child's going to live, and they're fighting for their life for day after day after day.
October 12, 2006 started out like any other afternoon football game. Zach was in the 8th grade, number 31 in the center of your screen. This play in the second quarter was when Zach's life went horribly wrong. Here's another angle. You can see him catch up with his opponent and make a tackle. His head snaps backwards and hits the field. Zach puts his hands up to his head, rocking back and forth. Doctors later said this is when he sustained a concussion and should not have returned to play. But in the second half, he was back in the game. Zach played defense. He's in the pile there making the tackle. And he played offense. Here he carries the ball. And here he makes a block. With his brain still recovering from the first concussion, doctors now believe these additional hits caused even more dangerous pressure inside his skull. His dad could tell something was off.
At the very end of the game, I noticed my son was shaking his head and not doing what a normal child should do, and I didn't understand what was going on, and I started getting a little concerned, and I walked out and asked Zach what was wrong with him, and he said, Dad, my head hurts really bad, my head hurts really bad. He started losing consciousness, Went down to the ground and suffered stroke after stroke.
With brain cells quickly dying, Zach was airlifted from the football field to Seattle's Harborview Medical Center. He spent a week in the ICU, 3 months in a coma, and had surgeries on both sides of his brain. His mother, Mercedes, remembers.
It was always nerve-wracking when the doctors would come in and check everything and stuff, and you could see the only thing that was protecting the brain was the skin. And every time they touched him, you were afraid, oh my gosh, I hope they're not doing something to hurt him. They reassured us that they weren't, but you still aren't, sure of that.
He didn't say his first word till about 9 months. He said, oh. 9 months after his injury. He couldn't move any part of his body for about 13 months, and he started moving his left side a little.
This is Zach Lysted today. The touchdowns and tackles on the football field are gone, but Zach still enjoys playing sports through video games. He's even learned to play Wii using his left arm. And he's able to be competitive with his best friend, Naya. Zach is a sophomore now. He was forced to miss a full year of school to concentrate on his recovery, and even now, he can't go full-time. We spent a typical day with him and saw just how grueling his schedule is.
Pull, Zach.
Go.
Pull.
First stop in the morning,
Nice work.
physical therapy to work on relearning how to walk.
Get tall, bring that weight forward. Good job, Zach.
Then speech therapy for improved language and reasoning skills.
Making inferences, drawing conclusions.
Second good catch.
Occupational therapy
There you go.
for coordination.
Okay, now we're coming out.
And after a quick meal in the van, he's off to work with a personal trainer at a local gym to try to rebuild his muscles.
So keep it slow. Control it on the way.
The hardest part of seeing their son go through this is knowing it was all preventable. The Lysteds have filed a claim against the school district, partly because Zach was sent back into the game after his first head injury.
My son had a concussion, was returned to play without being evaluated correctly, and had multiple hits after that led to his injury the way he is right now. If he would have been taken out of the game and not returned to play, all the medical professionals said my son would not be the way he is right now. They all say that.
Don't go on my knee. I learned not to go on my knee from my dad.
If somebody wants to trade me spots for a minute, they would totally understand how important it is to get the message out to kids, to parents, to coaches, what the long-lasting effect of a concussion and returning to play is.
In the year and a half since our report first ran, Zach has become a symbol of the growing awareness of the dangers of concussions in youth sports. His is a worst-case scenario, and there is no doubt that he needed immediate and life-saving medical attention. But while the vast majority of concussions are less severe, they still must be taken very seriously, as we saw when we went to a world-renowned concussion research center at the University of Pittsburgh.
Sometimes I would go downstairs and try and get something to eat, and I'd forget what I was doing. I'd start watching TV, then like 10 minutes later, I'd be like, what was I doing again?
We met wrestler Jarrett Chris on the first day his mother brought him into the concussion center.
Stand on that for me.
Jarrett, a high school senior, was obviously still feeling the effects of too many concussions. Dr. Mickey Collins is the assistant director of the concussion program here.
Just close your eyes.
He's running Jarrett through a bunch of simple tests to evaluate how bad his concussions are.
Do you feel like when you close your eyes, you're not able to center
I
yourself?
feel like I'm moving.
He's worried about what he sees.
Stick your thumb out.
He has severe headaches. He's very foggy. He's got a really slowed processing. It's almost like his Pentium 4 is like a Pentium 3. You know, the brain's just slower. You can see that when you talk to him. Faster. Come on. Faster. Faster. What happens when you do that?
I get blurred and like blurred vision. I could see double vision kind of with my thumb.
He has a lot of space and motion discomfort. His vestibular system isn't working properly, and you can see that in the evaluation as well. But he's got a lot of fatigue, a lot of thinking problems, a lot of emotional things going on for him right now. I think not only because he can't wrestle, but because of the concussion too.
Playing football at Westbrook has taught me a lot of things, how to work hard. And
Jarrett first suffered a concussion during football season, but continued to play before the concussion had fully healed. He hit his head a few more times and then sustained another couple of concussions during wrestling season, but he was reluctant to sit out.
We know that you played through these symptoms for several months. Why?
I didn't want to let my team down. I don't believe in like sitting out unless I'm like really, really, really hurt. I always wanted to help out my team. I never wanted to seem like I was like weaker than someone. I like to push through stuff.
Being tough, shaking off injuries for the sake of your team. These have long been the ethos of sports, especially football, and most especially in the NFL. Hang around old Lions of the Gridiron and you can't help but notice that the wear and tear has taken a physical toll. That's just part of the game. But what has long been debated is whether all those hits have taken a neurological toll as well. At the heart of the debate are men like this.
You gotta tip it up a little more. Okay. Got it? Let's get this.
Seeing him today, you would never guess that Ralph Wenzel used to be a star football player.
Yeah? Hello. How are you?
He's 65 years old now, and he's far different from the man his wife, Eleanor Perfetto, met almost 30 years ago.
Ooh, your hand is cold.
Wenzel played 7 NFL seasons from the late 1960s to the early 70s. He and Eleanor were looking forward to growing old together, but they started to notice problems.
Losing things. You know, I can't even tell you how many times he lost his checkbook, and so he stopped having a checkbook.
Worried, Eleanor took him to a neurologist who asked if Wenzel ever had a concussion as a player.
And Ralph's response to, "Have you ever had a concussion?" was more than I could count. And he said, "Well, you were ever like out cold?" And he said, "Oh yes." He said, I do remember at least one time when I was knocked out. I was out for a little while, came to, got back in the game and continued to play, and was running in the wrong direction on the field, and that was when he was taken off the field because he was that disoriented."
Doctors told Eleanor they believed a lifetime of hits to the head led to the way Ralph is now.
Number 62. Who was number 62? You were number 62. That's you.
Ralph isn't really able to speak in sentences anymore. I mean, he verbalizes and sound comes out, but it's kind of nonsense words. Every once in a while you catch a word that actually is a word, but most of the time it's very difficult.
I came to California and I brought with me 2 people. I don't know. I don't remember a time when I did that. What did we do there?
With Ralph unable to speak for himself, Perfetto has tried to be his voice. But for years, the league denied that there was a causal link between Ralph's condition and the head injuries he sustained as a player.
When I wrote my return to play guidelines for football and other collision sports over 23 years ago, the essence of those guidelines was that the athlete be asymptomatic of all post-concussion signs and symptoms, first at rest and then exertion, before they were allowed to return to play.
Over the course of our 2+ years of reporting, we found scientists who said they were not only convinced that a link exists between concussions and brain injury later in life, they said they had the research to prove it. CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Traumatic encephalopathy.
Yes, sir.
Is what? That's different from a concussion, or that sometimes is what results from concussions?
It's what can result from concussions as well as probably cumulative subconcussive blows if there are enough of them over a long enough period of time. But the important thing is all the other degenerative conditions of the brain, whether it be Alzheimer's, Niemann-Pick's disease, on, are inherited and they're not preventable. Traumatic encephalopathy is the one degenerative condition of the brain that is preventable.
Preventable, don't get a concussion, or if you get a concussion, take it easy, don't come back too quick, that sort of thing.
That's the thing. We're not saying that it's not realistic to think people aren't going to have concussions, whether they're athletes or not. But the head trauma must be properly taken care of. People must not subject themselves to subsequent head trauma while still symptomatic from an initial bout of head trauma.
And I can tell you I've examined thousands of brains from people in their 80s, 90s, hundreds, even 110-year-old, and this is not a normal part of aging. This is not something you normally see in the brain.
Ann McKee of Boston University has looked at the brains of deceased athletes and found physical evidence that was similar to that found in the brains of those suffering from dementia.
The real extreme changes that we see at the depths of the soul.
Cantu, Ann McKee, and other scientists came to Super Bowl 43 in Tampa, Florida, to try to get the NFL's attention.
This is something you would never should see in an 18-year-old brain, so this is something that is highly alarming.
But they were largely ignored, their meeting sparsely attended. A year later, at Super Bowl 44 in Miami, the scientists gathered again, and this time were greeted with open arms by the NFL Players Association. It seemed that the NFL might finally be ready to embrace the science of concussion-related injuries.
What we try to do is really pull in the best minds in this issue, in this business of how do we care for sports concussions so that we can have those frank and open discussions.
But the league's message was inconsistent at best.
The topic of concussions, as you well know, has recently become highly politicized. Scientific considerations took a back seat to political, media, and labor relations issues.
This January, Dr. Ira Casson, who served for years as the head of the NFL's Committee on Brain Injuries, testified before Congress that concussions in football are not well enough understood to prove scientific links to conditions like dementia.
There's no doctor's reports. There's no reports of neurologic exams. There's no reports of psychiatric exams in what's been published in the literature. It all comes from talking to the family members afterwards.
Tennessee Representative Steve Cohen was having none of it.
So isn't politicalization a little bit more important, just like erring on the side of caution and lives in the balance, rather than waiting for the ultimate perfect scientific data and how many more football players might have brain damage?
But Casson was undeterred by the criticism.
You need objective, scientific, medical examinations and studies so you can try to see if there's a clinical correlation between what you're finding in the brain and the clinical picture of the subjects. And that's not available.
When Dr. Casson testified this January, he had just resigned from his position with the NFL. Reports say he was pushed out as the league knew it needed to drastically overhaul its message. This March, the league appointed 2 distinguished neurosurgeons who each had a long history of studying concussions. Dr. Richard Ellenbogen of the University of Washington and Dr. Hunt Beecher of Northwestern University. They are the new co-chairs of the NFL's Head, Neck, and Spine Medical Committee. Your predecessor, Dr. Ira Casson, told Congress in January that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that chronic head blows in football, quote, result in long-term brain damage. But then Dr. Ann McKee, another distinguished physician who studies this link, calls Dr. Casson, quote, the voice of denial. Now, where do you come down on this, Doctor?
First of all, Rich and I have been practicing for a long time in neurosurgery. We know that head injuries have adverse impact on people. That's not rocket science. It's not new. We know that there's adequate information now on a number of autopsies that Ann McKee has done. We listened to her presentation recently at a Hopkins conference. There is no question that repetitive head trauma can cause permanent damage.
How do you come out on it, Doctor?
I think it was a perfect storm of media attention, catastrophic event with kids on the field in all sorts of sports, that all of a sudden everybody said, we need to study this a little more carefully.
Would you put the questions about dementia developing in older NFL retired players in that part of the perfect storm?
Absolutely. I most certainly would. And it was the media attention to that grabbed everybody and said, well, I think we need to study this more. We don't know how many players We don't know who's at risk. Why are there so many players that never develop this? So I think that this is an evolving field, and I think you can do another show in a year and our knowledge will be tripled in this arena. So I think this is the nature of science. There's some catastrophic event that occurs and it sparks innovation and it sparks discovery.
You know, has there been a prospective randomized trial comparing concussed versus non-concussed players? No, there's not that level of scientific data. There's enough association that I think all of us are very concerned. There's autopsy data that's, it is what it is. And it shows evidence of permanent damage, we believe, from concussions.
Well, let's talk about, with the NFL, what is the new approach?
The first thing is to establish a prospective database. In that database is going to be their life history of concussions, of documented episodes. It's going to be genetic information. It's going to be the NCAA days as well as schoolboy data that goes with players going forward, possibly with sensor information in that would really carefully track their NFL career. It will go with them into retirement. So we'll be keeping up with them, doing neuropsych testing every 5 years as they go through life, so that we really have a robust way looking forward, not retrospectively, not by surveys, but actual data.
These new NFL doctors told us that the science of concussions is still in its infancy, and that these unprecedented new long-term studies will eventually answer a lot of questions. One new form of technology they're looking at is sensors to measure impacts and the daily wear and tear of life on the battle lines of scrimmage. Will these be sensors in the helmet?
Right. Oh. And that gets to the question of is it the severity of impact or is it the cumulative dose? Radiologists in our hospitals wear badges, and every month they turn the badges in to see how much radiation they got. And this may be a very similar phenomenon.
And the purpose of the sensors would be what?
We can study each impact with these sensors, every single impact in isolation. We can look at the cumulative impacts set on any kind of threshold that we decide on.
As you put this information into a computer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's remotely done. It can be analyzed after the game. It can be analyzed over a season in a very robust way. And I think that's really the start of the kind of database I was referring to look truly at the experience, not just episodes where a player, raises his hand or the trainer comes and says, I'm worried about this player, but things that just normally occur on the field. We're going to be able to understand what those things really are and what they mean. And it's not just on Sunday, it's every workout.
What do you think, Doctor? Be some resistance from the players about this, saying, well, first of all, they're going to wire me up like some Frankenstein. Secondly, they're playing with my future income, and maybe what I ought to do is just disconnect this thing while I'm playing.
Well, I think the players are pretty sophisticated. I think the culture change has started. And news just in, Indianapolis racers and NASCAR racers have been looking at accelerometers, earpieces, which tell them how much G-force they take while they're racing. And people have reached out to Hunt and I saying, can you look at this technology or that technology? The players have come to us and said, we want this technology. We want to know. And I think they want a safe, long life as much as anybody else wants for them.
Any chance we'll see that soon, sensors in the helmet?
That is actually on our agenda this afternoon.
Dr. Bacher and Dr. Ellenbogen were in Chicago for a meeting of the NFL Committee on Concussions that they are now co-chairing. The doctors told us that we would be able to sit in on the meeting, but the NFL official who was sent to monitor our interview said that wasn't possible. In fact, the NFL seemed reluctant and nervous about us talking to the doctors at all. But both Dr. Bacher and Dr. Ellenbogen were determined to talk to us. Neither is being paid by the league, and they see an important part of their mission as educating the public. Plus, they say, there is a positive story to tell.
If you can imagine, the NFL puts together a committee with members of the NIH, the Surgical Neurology Branch Director, from the CDC, from MIT, from DOD, from the Department of Defense and DARPA. So the best minds in the field of traumatic brain injury are sitting on a committee and help directing us, saying we have to go this direction. We've got to study the cumulative effects of concussion or rehab for concussion.
The Defense Department is concerned because an estimated 10 to 20% of all soldiers who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan have suffered at least one minor concussion.
So the Department of Defense is giving money to MIT to study how to make soldiers safer in the field. Well, we co-opted that scientist, and he's now working on our committee, because if that technology is going to go to soldiers, we'd like it to go to players, whether it's pee-wee football or professional football. And that's the kind of exciting stuff that is happening because of the attention to this problem that Hunt and I have been treating for 3 decades.
But the doctors acknowledge that while all these studies will help in the future, they must also contend with the needs of athletes playing today. We met Philadelphia Eagles' longtime star running back Brian Westbrook in one of our previous reports. He has become a potent symbol among his peers and within the public at large about the difficult trade-offs in treating concussions in today's NFL.
He is out cold, I believe. Westbrook's down.
It all started on a routine play this past October.
I remember the beginning of the play, breaking the huddle, the quarterback calling out the calls at the line, and then I get the handoff, and the next thing that I know after that point is waking up.
Westbrook was knocked unconscious. His younger brother Byron, playing for the Redskins, rushed to his side.
And he is knocked out.
Great hit.
His knee hit him right in the head.
Great hit.
Both teams on their knees praying for Westbrook, who is moving down there, but his bell is rung.
I see my brother's face standing over top of me. I see the trainers, and you're kind of wondering, what just happened? Why are these people staring at me? Why is my brother on the field with me right now, looking down at me? And you're kind of confused as to what went on. And, you know, suddenly things start to come back into perspective, and you start to understand that, you know, obviously you got knocked out. Obviously you were out for a certain period of time. And now you have to get up off this field and, you know, go to the locker room and check things out.
Westbrook was forced to miss 2 games as he waited for his head to recover. How'd you take that?
It's tough. It's tough because as an athlete, your number one goal is to get out there and perform. That's your profession. That's what you do.
Westbrook returned to action November 15th against the San Diego Chargers. But then one seemingly routine tackle upended his life again.
And I run head first into the defender. He hits me on my right side of my face mask. And, you know, I was fine. I wasn't knocked out or anything like that.
But then Westbrook made eye contact with Eagles head coach Andy Reid on the sidelines.
And the one thing about Coach Reid, he's always watching. And I looked right at him, and he said, come on. He knew. And I kind of knew, too, so I just started walking to the sideline.
Westbrook says part of the problem is players get conflicting information about how to treat concussions. He had been checked out. He was cleared. But he now recognizes he returned to play too soon.
That's one thing that I would never play with, and I would encourage no young kid to play with a head injury because you can't replace your brain. You can never replace it.
Do you think your average middle school, high school, even college coach fully understands that?
I think they look at the small picture. The small picture is winning football games, sometimes having your best players out there. The big picture is these kids' lives are at stake. The big picture is it's more than just a game. It's not just a football game. It's life.
Hard to get that through your head when you're 15, 16 years old and dreaming of being a Brian Westbrook.
It's hard to get it through your head when you're 30 and you are Brian Westbrook. It's hard to do it because you want to go out there and play. That's what you've been doing it for the last 20 years. You want to go out there and play football, and that's what I want to do. And I know the risk. I've talked to the doctors. But you know, at some point you have to sit down and have a real heart-to-heart with yourself and say, you're not okay right now. And if you continue to put yourself at risk, you really are risking serious damage.
At the end of last season, Westbrook was cut by the Philadelphia Eagles. He says he is fit to play and has entertained offers from other clubs, but is still weighing his options. Westbrook and the NFL doctors know that how the league deals with concussions is being watched closely now by youth athletes, their parents, and coaches. That part of the story when we come back. Welcome back. When doctors Baker and Ellenbogen agreed to lead the NFL into a new direction in treating concussions, they say they had in mind more than just keeping professional players safe. They hope they can make a difference in the lives of millions of young athletes, from the Pee Wee leagues to major college sports. All too often, the doctors told us, parents, coaches, and the young athletes themselves don't realize concussions are truly a serious injury.
What I've said to coaches and coaches have said to me is that I won't tell you how to play football and I won't strategize on the football thing, but please don't tell me how to do the medical care for the players. And I think that's where we draw the line.
Doctor, you're from Texas, where football is kind of secular religion, if you will. This is a game that for decades has glorified the big hit, the hard hit, get up off the deck and get back in the game, and player toughness. Do you really think you can change the culture in the NFL, and by doing so, help change the culture at the college and below that level?
It's a great question, Dan, and I think all of us grew up with the no pain, no gain, play through the pain sort of mentality, and it was a badge of honor if you came out covered with blood and so forth. Our biggest responsibility, I think, is to draw the distinction between the knee and the ankle and the brain and the spinal cord. Those are different issues. You don't play through neurological injuries, whereas you probably can play through joint soft tissue injuries elsewhere in the body, but there are very special differences between the brain and spinal cord.
Well, as you know, we've been doing a series of reports over the last several years about concussions, and in the most recent times that we've concentrated on the effect on junior high school athletes, and to some degree college athletes. Do you or do you not think that what the NFL does and doesn't do has a trickle-down effect?
It has a terrific trickle-down effect. And I think that's one of the things that attracted both of us to this position. The millions of school kids that are participating, boys and girls, are directly impacted by what the NFL does.
Mesquite, Texas, a blue-collar suburb of about 135,000 just outside of Dallas. It's the kind of place where rodeo and barbecue are big, but high school sports is king, year-round. From football to soccer, from volleyball to basketball. At Mesquite High School, home of the Skeeters, athletic success has a long history that can be found in the trophy cases that line the school's hallways.
There you go. Come on, come on, come on.
Athletes in this part of Texas pride themselves on their toughness.
You need to throw up, finish, go over there off the turf. Yes, sir.
And until recently, that meant shaking off even the most serious head injuries to get back in the game. But all that changed when the school district's head athletic trainer started hearing how concussions could be a lot more serious for young athletes than previously thought.
Their brain is still growing, still maturing. And if you injure that brain, it's a significant thing.
Bucky Taylor has been an athletic trainer for more than 2 decades. He says he went to a conference about 4 years ago where Boston University's Dr. Robert Cantu talked about the possible link between concussions and long-term disability. And he got a sinking feeling.
You know, I just looked back over my career and I thought, my goodness, I don't know how many concussions I average a year, probably 5 or 6, and I can think back over my career, some of those kids that had really bad concussions. And I took care of them the way the standard of care was at the time, but I worried. I mean, it just worried me because, the NFL's doing, all these studies, they're getting the cadaver brains, and they've been showing some really significant damage to the brain that these gentlemen have had over the years. When I saw that the first time, again, it goes back to me thinking about my career. I think, that could be a brain of a kid that I had. And the first concussion that he had was when he was a freshman at Mesquite High School.
Was that a case of sort of a light bulb went off?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I came back and I talked with our athletic trainers in our town, and we kind of felt like we needed to have something in writing, and we all needed to be on the same page.
Now, We went out to visit a school district in Texas, talked to the sports trainer there. He's a leader in the field. And what came through pretty loud and clear is that there's no standardized list for sports trainers and coaches to go by. Is that still the case?
I think at that level, that is the case. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to make sure that we do at the NFL level so that it will trickle down quickly, to give them very careful guidelines about getting people out of the game, what is required to get them back to practice on another day.
I mean, this is an evolving field. There's still a lot we have to learn. What we do know about concussion is if a kid fully recovers, and I mean fully recovers, no headaches, no symptoms, no confusion, maybe even has a normal brain scan, doing as well as he was in school before, there's probably no risk that we know today of preventing him from being active in sports. We know sports are good for kids. We don't know that once kids recover that there's any risk to them necessarily. But believe me, we're studying it now.
But contact sport. Doctor, I hear a lot of people say, listen, I don't let my kid play football, that is American football, because it's too rough, too much danger of injury, so I put him into soccer or volleyball. Believe me, among other things, far less likely to concussion. What about that?
I think, depending on how kids play the sport and how well the coaching staff and the trainers supervise the play, I think all of those sports can be done safely, and all of those sports can be associated with concussion if they're not played well.
I was somewhat surprised myself to find in volleyball, which you don't think of a concussion-inducing sport, that there have been people, and no small amount of people, who've gotten concussions in volleyball.
Well,
that's correct.
The highest rate of concussion right now that we know, and it might be because women report concussions more often than men, is girls hockey. So soccer, hockey, baseball, football, cheerleading, they all have concussion associated with them. Doesn't make the sport unsafe. We have to realize that this cuts across both genders and all sports. Anything with contact or collision is up for discussion about how to make it safer.
I wish I was still the girl that people looked at and said, oh, she's the athlete, she's the basketball player, oh, I've seen her play, but that's gone now.
16-year-old Nikki Popular was a high school basketball star. At Marlboro High in New Jersey, she was the first freshman in 6 years to start varsity as a point guard. Coaches told her parents that a college scholarship was in her future. Basketball was a game she loved since she was a little girl. And Nikki played the game hard. That's her with the ball, number 23 in the dark blue jersey. Nikki was making her way up through the elite youth ranks. But as she did, she was suffering injuries that she would pay for later. I think most of us who watch football, particularly professional football, concussions are a given.
Yes.
But as you were developing as a basketball player, did you think about concussions, think about head injuries?
Not at all. Like when I got hit in the head, like the first couple of times, I was just like I have to suck it up. Like I want to play, I don't want to sit out. But nobody even told me to sit out. So I was like, okay, then it's fine.
We were led to believe that each concussion was its own entity. And once her brain healed from that concussion, she was fine to play again. What we know now is it's not just the big hits along the way, it's the dozens of little hits in between that you don't even notice.
Kathy Popular is Nikki's mother. She says her daughter first had a concussion in 7th grade. In the end, Nikki figures she had 11 concussions. She finally went to an independent neuropsychologist who said her basketball career was over.
She was really the first one to say, stop, don't exercise, don't go back to sports, because I could get dizzy or nauseous. But she said, I can't get hit in the head anymore because each one makes it harder to recover.
Well, what are you not able to do? Or what is the advice that you not do?
I can't go on a train. I can't go swimming, can't go in the ocean, I can't go to the movies, I can't listen to loud music or have bright lights or flashing.
Television?
I could watch television, but I try and like put it down to an hour because it gives me a headache.
Well, you take tests in school?
I take tests, but I have special accommodations for them. I get extra time. I get up to 50% extra time. I have to leave class early because they don't want me in the halls.
Because of the noise and
because of the noise and just
bumping.
Yeah.
She was very, very depressed for a long time. She would come home crying and cry all night and just be very out of sorts.
I know it may be a difficult question to answer. Is Nikki the same person that she was?
She's getting there, but she's not.
Doctors say Nikki's brain might never fully recover. And although Nikki shot a few baskets for our cameras, it should be noted that just the slightest tap on the head now could harm her.
Like you didn't miss a beat.
It really requires the culture change at the physician level and at the player level. And I will tell you, my own son got concussed playing football, and he said, "Dad, what do you know about this subject? I'm fine. I'm going back in." And we sat him out, and it took 2 weeks for him to get better. So it hasn't even trickled down to the neurosurgical son level. So I think we got a way to go, but we're going to get there.
But doctor, as part of educating, and your colleague says we'll get there, what do we do about the athlete? He's in high school and he wants to get a football scholarship to a university or college, preferably Division I, who's saying, listen, this is my time. We only played 10 games this year. This is my shot, and you got to let me do it. And then the next scale of that is the college player. Because you don't understand, if I go even middle of the NFL draft, I may be set for life financially. So don't be telling me on the basis of what you yourself say is still evolving science not to play. How do we handle that?
I think it's a matter of education for all. And I think the answer to your question is to make sure everybody knows that they've got a life as well as a career. And that career is going to be short. Their life hopefully will be very long.
It's one of the things players have a great deal of difficulty recognizing is that the average career of an NFL running back is what, about 3 years, maybe a year and a half?
That is correct. And I want to second what Hunt says is our goal is to protect the lives for the entire term of their adult life. And certainly players' goal is to get to the best they can be, but they're not mutually exclusive. I think you can make all these games just as fun, just as fast, but we can also make them safer. It's no different than what the scientists did to make cars safer. They put airbags in it.
Against great resistance at the time.
Correct, but it was an evolution of science which said, hey, guess what? If you don't do this, you're going to have this many injuries. If you do this, there might be some injuries, but not as many and not as severe. We're trying to develop the science to a point where we can prove to people that there is a cause and effect between making the sport healthier and the long-term goals of the players.
Well, raises the question of what we call the trickle-down effect. That is what the pros do. 4-, 5-, 6-year-olds begin to imitate.
That's
Junior
right.
high school team, high school team.
I think the trickle-down effect is huge. And that's where, if we change the culture at the professional level, it's going to work at the NCAA level, it's going to work at the youth level. Interestingly, when the NFL changed their rules in 2009 about return to play and making players sit it out after they had a concussion, the NCAA adopted almost a similar posture the next year. Same year the Zach Lystedt laws passed. So there's no question it's a trickle-down effect, and it's happening pretty quickly. That's a good thing.
In February 2009, Zach Lystedt and his family traveled to their state capital in Olympia, Washington, to testify in support of a bill that would require a major rethink of return-to-play guidelines for youth sports.
My life changed drastically.
In May 2009, the Zach Lystedt bill was signed into law. Dr. Ellenbogen was particularly pleased. He happens to be Zach's doctor. Well, the Lystedt law, as it's called, named after Zach Lystedt. What does this law require?
Well, it requires three simple things. There's an education piece where the coaches and the parents get educated on what a concussion is, and they sign a waiver saying they understand this and they'll let their child play. Number two is once a child seems to have a concussion or even looks like it's a concussion, they sit out. And what that means is not only did they sit out that game and the rest of the game, they don't go back to practice until number three. They're cleared by a healthcare professional who can say they're back to baseline before they even practice again.
Now that's law in Washington State.
That is correct.
And that or something similar to it is law in what, 6 other states?
6 other states such as Texas and Oregon, and it's spreading through the country like wildfire, hopefully.
This past May, Dr. Ellenbogen asked NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to write a letter to the governors of the remaining 44 states urging them to pass their own version of the Lystat law. The commissioner agreed, and just 2 weeks ago, Massachusetts became the 7th state to pass such a law.
We want to educate. We also want to advocate. And if that means helping to pass laws that protect kids, then that's what we're going to do.
We're in the process, actually, at this meeting here in Chicago to set the stage for how we're going to put that message out to all state governments so that they really get on this and get it done this year.
And to somebody who says, listen, we already have too much government involved in our daily lives. We don't need the government, state, or much less federal, to be dictating to us how we handle our young athletes. You would say what?
You sound like me, but I would say we need one more regulation, and that's to protect the kids.
That came up in Washington State. Legislators asked us, how much in this environment is it going to cost us? Well, guess what? If you don't do it, it's going to cost you a lot more, certainly in the lives of young kids, and the costs of the medical bills for kids that don't sit out and sustain injuries. So I think the argument shouldn't be, why do we need one more law? Is how can we live without this law? Because it's going to cost too much if we don't pass it in all 50 states.
Well, and you did mention the possibility of a lawsuit now that we know more about concussions. That's always out there.
That's always out there. That's certainly, when you think about it, that changed playgrounds in America. The lawsuits associated with kids falling off playgrounds and hitting the cement changed the way we built playgrounds, and now you look all over, there are cities with much cooler playgrounds than you and I played on. There's no cement, there's wood chips, and the bars are no longer rebar. So I think it sparks innovation. So now we have safer playgrounds.
At the beginning of this year, we went out to Seattle again to check on Zach's progress and found a young man more determined than ever to shed light on the topic of concussions in youth sports.
What's up, Zach?
Hello, my dog.
My dog?
My dog.
Martin dog. I'm very nice. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good.
Zachary has done so much this last year. You know, last year it was real hard for Zach to hold himself up, and Zach actually stands out of his wheelchair now, and Zach continues pushing that right leg to do more and more so that it'll eventually carry him in a walk.
Very nice. Like breakdancing, right?
We've just started a new thing called Pushing Boundaries, where he's actually in a device that is a robotic machine.
So things are feeling okay? This is the Locomat. It's like a gait training machine, basically. It's try to stimulate the neurons, basically, to kind of retrain the body how to walk in the proper gait.
Of course, it's not comfortable because I'm hanging, like, from my cross.
Okay, here we go.
Like, I get better at one thing each day.
Yeah.
Like, at one thing I can say I've significantly gotten better at it.
What did you get better at today?
Oh.
I thought you got better at one thing. Standing. You did good today standing.
Yeah, standing up straight.
What else?
I said one thing.
One thing. Okay. Don't press it, huh?
My goal for graduation is that I will be able to walk the stage for graduation like a normal kid.
Good job, dude. You'll be able to do that.
I think and believe that.
Yeah, you'll be able to do that.
If I have to use a cane or whatever.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll paint it up. It'll be a nice looking cane.
The open cane. Hopefully, my law can go national.
It will go national, buddy. It will be going national.
If I continue at this pace, anything's possible.
That's right.
That's like the one motto I've always lived by, is anything's possible.
All right, good.
Peace out.
Well, one of the criticisms we got when we reported his case was, listen, this was a tragedy, but an extremely rare case. What do you make of that criticism?
Well, I think certainly the outcome is extremely rare, and the vast majority of concussions don't end up with a blood clot in the brain. I think that's true. I think the difference, though, is the culture change. Even several years ago, kids did not sit out after they got what seemed to be a concussion. So once again, they didn't adhere to the if in doubt, sit it out. And so it was no pain, no gain sort of attitude.
What else can we take away from that case?
Well, I think that there was sort of a perfect storm. I mean, we're learning things. I mean, you need a terrible problem like this, a catastrophe like this, to kind of energize people. The parents, Vic and Mercedes Lysted, said to me, I don't want this ever to happen to another kid. That's what we want. We can't change what happened to Zach. And I think with the media, and I think with our advanced knowledge of what's going on in terms of concussion, certainly in the military, we're changing the way we look at this problem. Hunt and I have been treating concussions for 3 decades, but now people are beginning to pay attention to this. This is a good thing because it's going to spark innovation. It's going to change the way we play sports. It's going to advance the science so that we make everything we do safer.
Can the game of football that we know and a lot of us love, can it continue to be played looking toward the future without concussions?
You know, I think that's a complex question. Can driving be made safe, perfectly safe, without risk? The answer to that would be no. It's going to be better in the future than it is right now. Airbags have made a huge difference. And I think football, when you have large, powerful athletes at the elite level, engaged in the type of activity that is required to win at the elite level, you know, there are going to be people in harm's way, and we have to protect them with the proper equipment, the proper rules, the proper education, the proper perspective about it is not just about that game.
What do you think, Doctor? Can it survive as a gladiator sport?
No, I think it's going to be maybe potentially better, faster, and safer. I think you're going to flash forward in 10 years and football's going to be more exciting. I don't think you're going to eliminate concussions. I don't think that's realistic, but I think you're going to see less of them, and I think you're going to see less long-term effects of concussions because we're going to find them earlier and treat them more aggressively.
Dr. Hunt Bacher and Dr. Richard Ellenbogen. When we return, a final thought. So stay here with us.